If you like our short stories, please like, comment and subscribe for more. The house was too quiet. Not the kind of quiet that felt peaceful, but the kind that pressed on Leah's chest until her breaths felt shallow. The last of the visitors had gone, the condolences had been spoken, and now the business of packing up her late mother's house had fallen to her alone. She stood in the doorway of the cedar-scented bedroom, the room that had always felt like a sanctuary growing up. Her mother's perfume still lingered faintly, a citrus floral scent that made her throat tighten. Dust danced lazily in the strip of afternoon light spilling through the curtains. The air smelled of cedar blocks, fabric softened with age, and something faintly metallic, the stillness of a room where time had stopped. Leah set the flattened moving boxes on the bench at the end of the bed. She had promised herself she would be practical today, no detours into sentimentality, no collapsing under the weight of memory. Just pack. Fold clothes. Label boxes. Step out of this house piece by piece until it was no longer hers to carry. Her hands moved on autopilot, pulling dresses from hangers, folding cardigans that still held the faint warmth of her mother's touch. But the deeper she went into the wardrobe, the heavier her chest became. She pulled down a folded blanket from the top shelf, and something bumped against her wrist. Cardboard. Curious, she reached back and tugged out a shoebox. The cardboard faded, its lid banded with a ribbon the colour of dried roses. The handwriting across the lid made her pause. Neat blue pen. Keepsakes. The box was light in her hands, almost delicate. She carried it to the bed and sat, running her fingers over the faded ribbon. She hesitated, as though opening it might unleash something she wasn't ready for. But then she slipped the ribbon free, and the lid whispered open. Inside lay a small collection of mementos, a dried corsage from prom, yellowed ticket stubs, a medal from a spelling bee she had nearly forgotten. Beneath these, stacked in neat bundles, were papers. The top sheet was so familiar that Leah's breath caught. Her own handwriting, looping and slightly messy, the way she had written in high school. The page was addressed simply, "Dear Jonah." Her fingers trembled as she unfolded it. "I'm writing this because it's easier than saying it." The words yanked her backward in time, porch swings creaking in the summer, cicadas buzzing so loud it felt like the air itself vibrated, Jonah's skateboard scraping the pavement as he pulled to a stop in front of her house. She remembered the way he had tucked a pencil behind her ear one day, grinning as if she were the smartest girl in the world. The letter went on. Memories of the last day of junior year, of the way he made her laugh until her stomach hurt, of how much she wanted to tell him something more. It ended with a line she remembered writing but had buried with shame. "If you asked, I would say yes to anything." Leah pressed her thumb against the words. She had never sent it. She had folded the page, slid it into a stack of homework, and hidden it away, too scared to let it fly out into the world where it could be ignored, or worse, rejected. She laid the letter aside, but beneath it were more. Dozens. Some short, some pages long, all in her hand. "Dear Jonah, I saw a black dog with a white nose and thought of yours. The one that hated the mailman but loved me. Dear Jonah, I failed my driving test again. The instructor said I brake like I'm apologising. Dear Jonah, are you happy?" Every page was a window into who she had been, a girl who felt too much and said too little. Leah sat back overwhelmed. Why had her mother kept these? Had she found them in her room years ago? But then, at the very bottom of the box, her pulse stuttered. The handwriting was different. Not hers. A bundle of envelopes tied neatly with twine, each one addressed to her in a familiar slanted scrawl. The letters were worn, their edges curled, but the flaps were sealed. And the name across the front, Leah, was written exactly as Jonah had always written it. The loop of the H curling like a wave. She froze. Her eyes flicked to a scrap of notepaper tucked under the bundle. Her mother's tidy, unmistakable handwriting, found under porch steps. Leah's stomach dropped. Her mother had found them. Her mother had kept them. Her hands shook as she picked up the top envelope. The date in the corner blurred through tears. The summer before Jonah left for college. She slid her nail under the flap and unfolded the page. "Leah, I've tried to say this in person and it keeps coming out like jokes." So I'm writing. If you asked, I would stay. The air in the room shifted. She pressed the paper to her chest and felt her heart hammering, not from memory, but from something alive and immediate. He had loved her. All along, he had written what she had written. They had been two kids in the same town, hearts aligned, yet silence, and now she knew interference had stolen everything. The weight of betrayal tightened her chest. Her mother had hidden these. A whole future stuffed under porch steps, bound and forgotten. Leah stood abruptly, pacing a small path between the bed and the dresser. The air smelled sharp like cedar and grief. In the mirror, her reflection stared back, older now, stronger, but with the same eyes that had once filled these pages. She wasn't ready to forgive. She wasn't ready to let this go. Her hand hovered over the letters, then gripped the bundle tight. The decision formed without words, as steady as a train track laid years before. She would find him. The box slid into a tote bag. The weight of it felt like carrying a living thing. Outside, the evening air smelled of rain. In the distance, a train horn wailed, 3 long notes that echoed through the small town. Leah froze on the porch, heart pounding as the vibrations trembled faintly through the wood beneath her feet. She counted the seconds between the sound and the rumble, just as she and Jonah had done as kids. She closed her eyes and whispered, "Tomorrow." Then she locked the door and walked into the night, the letters pressing against her ribs like a second heartbeat. Morning thinned the shadows into something soft and forgivable, but Leah wasn't in a forgiving mood. She carried the tote from the hall chair back to the cedar room like it might change its contents if she let it sleep. It didn't. The ribbon still lay coiled on the quilt like a shed skin. The bundle of his letters waited, edges feathery from years of air. She untied the twine. The knot remembered how to come apart. The second envelope cracked at the seam, the paper giving a tiny sigh. His voice rose from the page as if it had only been waiting for breath. "Leah, I timed the train from the crossing to your block again. 47 heartbeats if I'm nervous. 42 if you're walking with me. I keep looking for ways to measure anything that isn't you." She laughed once, helpless, sudden, at the shamelessness of it. At the boy who had wrapped math around longing like it was a trick he could teach himself. The next letter held a smudged thumbprint and a grease-dark ring where a slice of pizza had set down. "First day meeting the coach. He said my arm looks live, which I think is a compliment. I keep pretending I belong, and then I picture your porch light and want to turn around. If you asked, I would." She turned the page and time turned with it. He drew a tiny star map in the corner, labelled not with constellations but with inside jokes. The cereal box nebula, the porch swing belt, Leah rising. He admitted he was afraid of dorm quiet, of the kind of silence that didn't have her in it. A later letter, ink darker, handwriting tighter, like someone bracing, held 2 sentences only. "If you wanted me to, I would come back after 1 semester. I'd take the night train and sit on your kitchen floor while we figured it out. Tell me you want that. Or tell me you don't. I can carry either answer." "I cannot carry not knowing." Leah set her palm on the paper and felt the thud of her own late answer radiate through years. She worked the air in and out, steadying against the thought that someone had looked at this plea and made a private decision to bury it. "Why?" she asked the room, and meant it to the ceiling, the floorboards, the invisible outline where her mother used to move between dresser and mirror. "Why decide for us?" The next envelope had dirt along its seal. In the corner, Jonah had written the date, and under it, in smaller script, "Night before I go." "Leah, I don't know how to leave what I haven't had the courage to claim. If you asked, I would stay. If you don't, I will try to be good at leaving. But please write me anyway, even if it's only about the weather or the dog or the train. Please give me a string back to us." There it was again, please, a word that rang like a small bell and made everything after it clear. She pictured him at 17, hunched over a cheap desk lamp, penciling the outline of a future he would step into without certainty, asking for a string. She pictured herself, same week, same town, laying down the string at her own desk and never throwing it. She kept reading. There were funny letters about the neighbour's cat who hated Jonah's shoelaces, about the old man at the corner who whistled like a bird and made every summer sound like a parade. There were bare ones, 3 lines thrown like anchors. Today I missed you and didn't know where to put it. Today I wished you were sitting in the passenger seat, feet on the dash. Today I almost practiced saying stay out loud. At the very bottom, beneath the last of his envelopes, lay that slip of her mother's stationery again, the fountain pen's blue so steady it looked mechanical, found under porch steps. The neatness of it took her breath away. Such tidy letters to carry such untidy consequence. Found, kept, labelled, filed. Leah felt anger like a clean blade, no flourishes, nothing ornate. Not the wild adolescent fury that slams doors, but the adult knowledge that harm can look like order, that control can wear the face of care. She pressed the note flat and then slid it back under the stack, as if returning a fossil to the layer of rock that named it. Downstairs, sunlight had made its slow way across the kitchen tiles. The pencil marks on the doorframe, height lines from summer birthdays, stopped just at the year Jonah left. Leah laid her fingers against 5-3 and remembered tilting her head to see if she could fool the line higher. On the counter, her phone vibrated with blank notifications, the passive patience of a world always ready to offer answers in exchange for questions you aren't sure you want to ask. She opened a browser and typed his name. There he was. Not a ghost, not a memory in sepia. A man. Whitaker Tree Anamp. Timber in a banner with a squirrel and an acorn whose cap looked like a tiny knight's helmet. Photos in a grid, him by a truck, him in a canvas jacket, sawdust in his beard like frost. His eyes were still that exact shade of serious that turned into mischief with one sentence. She scrolled. A review from LCP. Honest, on time, cleaned up like a dream. And that laugh. Another with a maple leaf emoji, local guy. Fair prices. Saved our fence in the storm. The phone number rhymed. Of course it did. He would have made it a rhyme to help people remember, to make strangers smile before they dialed. Her thumb hovered over call. The blue oval waited, a small electric plank across a chasm. She could hear how it would go if she tapped. The ring, his voice, her voice, the way words would stumble at first, then find the old path between them. Or she could not. She could find the street and place herself in front of the life he built and decide whether to knock. Leah set the phone face down on the counter. The screen went black, reflecting her, hair up, the under-eye circles that grief softens into a kind of translucence, 10 years of weather she couldn't name written as fine lines around her mouth. She picked the phone up again, this time for maps. 2 lefts from the square, past the bakery whose sign still had a crack at the corner, she could see it in her mind, then that low brick building that once housed a feed store and now held a yoga studio and a place that sold succulents in teacups. Whitaker Tree and Amp. Timber sat at the end of the block, bay door facing south, a line of sap-stained sawhorses like arrow of patient animals. She wrote the directions on a scrap of grocery list paper with a pencil she found in the junk drawer, like a person preparing for a drive across a country without cell towers. She didn't trust the little arrow on her screen to get her where she needed to go. She needed her own hand to lead. The tote was heavier when she lifted it, as if paper could soak up intent. On impulse, she added one more thing to the box, a blank card from a stack near the phone, the kind with a small pressed leaf on the front. She didn't know whether she would give it to him. She didn't write in it. She only liked the idea that not every envelope in that box had its story already written. She washed the single coffee mug she'd used, dried it, and placed it upside down on the rack. It felt like closing a book to save a place. In the hall, the mirror caught her again. The girl who wrote unsent letters and the woman who had found them shared a face and a spine. The difference was not years, but a willingness to let a yes be said where a maybe had protected her. On her way out, Leah paused at the threshold and reached up to the doorframe, to the lowest of the pencil lines. Beneath it, in tiny writing, her mother had once added the date. Leah traced it. Love and harm could travel in the same handwriting. She understood that now, and it made forgiveness complicated and not urgent. On the porch, the air smelled of cut grass and rain promised but not yet delivered. A neighbour she barely remembered waved from across the street with the bland cheer of the vaguely informed. Leah waved back. The rails still trembled after long trains, Her hand remembered where to rest to feel it. She didn't drive right away. She sat with the keys in her lap and let the map of the next hours draw itself on the inside of her chest. She would go. She would stand where his life touched the street. She would not ask anything. She would put the box between them like a table and let the present decide what to serve. A cloud moved off the sun and the cedar room upstairs flashed in her mind, a brief lit square like a held breath released. Leah turned the key. The engine admitted its low animal hum. "Window seat," she told the letters as she buckled the tote into the passenger side, the click a small ceremony. "We're going to see where you were meant to go." She pulled away from the curb slowly, as if leaving fast might snap something. The street down to the square was exactly as it had always been, and not at all. New paint over old brick, a coffee shop where hardware had once been, the same undertow of small-town noticing. She stopped at the light and felt it. Fear, yes, but braided now with something steadier. Bravery wasn't a drumbeat. It was a quiet posture. It was the way her hands stayed loose on the wheel. She turned left. The sign was smaller than she expected. Whitaker Tree and Amp. Timber was painted in cream letters on a wooden board above the wide bay door. The squirrel with acorn logo perched at the corner, cheerful in a way that made her chest ache. She parked down the block, killed the engine, and sat with the hum fading out of her ears. The tote with the letters buckled in beside her looked heavier than when she had set it down. She ran a hand across the fabric. "We're here," she murmured, as if the letters were passengers on a pilgrimage. Through the bay door she could see the skeleton of the shop, saw horses lined like soldiers, a band saw with its blade sleeping still, the bench scattered with clamps and pencils dulled by use. Sunlight poured through the open space, catching dust motes that drifted lazily, unhurried. Her pulse climbed. She thought of all the ways this could go wrong, his blank stare, his laugh, his anger. The possibility that he had long since forgotten what she had carried every year. The possibility that she was nothing more than a chapter he'd closed. But the letters in her bag said otherwise. Leah got out, steadied her breath and crossed the gravel. The crunch underfoot was loud enough to announce her before she touched the threshold. The bell above the door gave a polite ding, though it was already propped open. He was bent over a plank, measuring twice with a stub of pencil. Sawdust clung to his shirt, his beard. His hair was shorter now, touched at the temples with grey, but when he straightened at the bell, when his eyes found hers, the years collapsed. For a moment he was 17 again, skateboard tucked under one arm, grin crooked, eyes full of something he never said. For a moment she was 17 too, porch swing beneath her, fingers ink-stained from letters she didn't mail. "Leah," he said. Just her name, but it rearranged the air. Her throat closed. She forced it open. "Hi." It sounded too small, too light. She lifted the tote onto the nearest workbench. "I found something." "At my mother's." "Under the porch steps." His face shifted, confusion then dawning recognition. His hands stilled. "I thought they were gone," he said quietly. "I left them there the night before I left. I couldn't carry them. Not where I was going." She slid the tote open, showing the box, the bundles of letters. "She found them. She kept them." Jonah exhaled like someone unbuckling after a long drive. "May I?" Leah nodded. He untied the twine with careful fingers, as though afraid the paper might disintegrate in his hands. He pulled out the first envelope, opened it, scanned, then stopped. His thumb rested on the ink. "I waited," he said, voice raw. "I checked the mailbox until it felt like punishment. I wrote," she admitted. "But I never sent." "Brave on paper." "Silent out loud." He shook his head, almost smiling, but not. "We were kids, afraid of everything except the wrong things." A pause long enough for the smell of sap and cedar to seep in. He set the letter down, reached for another, then stopped himself. "Not all at once. I don't think I could take all of them at once." Leah folded her arms, held them tight against her ribs. "I'm not here to ask anything of you. I wanted you to know it was real. That we both felt it." He looked at her then, really looked, the way he used to when he was about to turn a joke into something serious. "I never doubted it was real. I just thought it was mine alone." A laugh broke from her throat, shaky. We were so good at hiding from each other, and so bad at hiding it. They both smiled, small, fragile things. The shop was quiet except for a bird outside calling insistently from a wire. Jonah cleared his throat. There's a new cafe around the corner. Do you want to? Yes, she said too quickly, then steadied. Yes. They walked side by side, not touching, not speaking, their steps accidentally matching. The cafe smelled of roasted beans and sugar. The barista greeted him by name, handed him a paper cup without asking. Usual? Jonah asked Leah. I've never been here, she said. Then let's start new. He ordered her something light, something with foam. They sat by the window, cups warming their hands. They talked about safe things first. The town's changes, the bakery turned into a boutique, the football field now turf instead of grass. But the safe things dissolved quickly. So, Leah said finally. What now? You have a life. His face tightened. I do. A wife? She asked carefully. He shook his head. Not married. But I've been with someone. For years. Rachel. The word hung unsaid, but Leah heard it anyway. She looked down at the cup, traced the rim with her finger. Then this is dangerous. He leaned closer. Leah, I don't want to cheapen what we had, what we have, by turning it into something stolen. Good, she said, relief sharp in her chest. Because I won't be an affair. I can't. Not after everything we lost already. His eyes softened. I wouldn't ask you to be. I don't even know what I'm asking right now. I just know that when I saw you, when I opened those letters, something in me woke up. Leah met his gaze. In it she saw the boy she had loved and the man who had learned how to live without joy. She felt the ache of both. They sipped their coffee in silence. Outside, a train rumbled faintly through town, its horn a low, mournful note. They both turned their heads, instinctively counting the seconds until the vibration reached the cafe windows. Leah whispered, 47. Jonah laughed softly. Still the same? For a moment the years peeled back and they were who they had been, two kids timing trains, pretending the universe sent them messages. But when the train passed, the world stayed stubbornly in the present. Jonah had Rachel. Leah had a box of ghosts. They finished their coffee. At the corner they stopped, both reluctant to leave. Tomorrow? Jonah asked, quiet. Leah nodded, her pulse skittering. Tomorrow. She walked away with the tote heavy at her side, both terrified and certain that her life had just tilted on its axis. The second meeting wasn't planned like the first. Jonah texted her from a number she didn't recognize at first. Just 3 words. The lake? Noon? Leah hesitated over the screen, thumb hovering. The lake had been their place once, mornings where the mist hung like gauze, evenings where fireflies blinked above the reeds. She typed yes before fear could rewrite her mind. When she arrived, the lake shimmered in late sun, the dock creaking under her steps the same way it had a decade ago. Jonah was already there, sitting cross-legged at the end, tossing pebbles into the water. He looked up as she approached, and for a second she saw that boy again, the one who used to challenge her to stone-skipping contests until their arms ached. You're late, he teased gently, but his eyes were softer than his voice. Some things don't change, she replied, lowering herself beside him. The dock dipped under their combined weight, water lapping at the edges. They didn't talk at first. They just sat, shoulders nearly brushing, letting the air between them remember how to carry their silence. Finally, Jonah reached into a paper bag. I brought sandwiches. Elsie still wraps them in butcher paper. Turkey with extra pickles? She asked, smiling. You think I'd forget? He handed her one. The first bite carried her back 10 years, when they'd eaten these same sandwiches under the same sun, their bare feet kicking at the water. She laughed, almost choking. God, it tastes like homework and summer. Jonah laughed too, the sound so familiar it loosened something deep inside her. You always said that, like food was memory. It is, she said softly. Like letters. That silenced him. His jaw worked and he looked out over the lake. Leah, about Rachel. Leah's heart stilled. What about her? He rubbed the back of his neck. She's good. Solid. Kind. But it's not this. It's never been this. Leah stared at the rippling water, her pulse loud in her ears. Jonah, no, let me say it, he interrupted, voice rough. I don't laugh with her the way I laugh with you. I don't feel awake. I've built a life with her because it was steady, and I told myself steady was enough. He looked at her, and the rawness in his eyes made her chest ache. But it isn't, not when you're here. Leah shook her head. Don't say that, not if you don't mean it. I do, he said fiercely. She set her sandwich down, appetite gone. Jonah, listen to me, I won't be an affair. I won't be a secret. If you're unhappy, that's between you and Rachel. But I can't, her voice cracked, I can't be the other woman in your story. His expression softened, his shoulders sinking. I know, I'd never want to make you that. He exhaled. I don't know what to do yet. Then figure it out, Leah said quietly. Without me in the shadows. They let the silence settle again, heavier this time. But then Jonah chuckled suddenly, reaching for a pebble. Bet you can't beat 5 skips? Leah raised a brow. You're on. She threw, the stone skipping 4 times before sinking. Jonah whooped, tossing his, which skipped 6 clean times across the water. You've been practicing, she accused. Or maybe I've just been waiting for you to catch up, he said with a grin. The tension broke and laughter spilled between them, warm and unguarded. For a while they were just 2 kids again, skipping stones and teasing each other, letting joy be simple. But when the sun dipped lower and the shadows stretched across the lake, the weight returned. As they stood, Jonah touched her arm lightly, almost reverently. Thank you, he murmured. For what? For being here. For reminding me what it feels like to be alive. Her throat tightened, but she nodded. Don't thank me, just be brave. Do what you couldn't do back then. They walked back to the cars in silence, shoulders close but not touching. At the parking lot they paused. Tomorrow? Jonah asked again, tentative. Leah smiled faintly. Tomorrow. She drove away with the letters waiting in the passenger seat, her heart a knot of hope and fear. The spark was alive again, dangerously alive. And for the first time she believed he might choose her. The third meeting was quieter, more deliberate. They didn't go to the cafe or the lake. Jonah had texted her in the morning, come to the shop after hours. Just us. Bring the box. The bay door was rolled halfway down when she arrived, golden light spilling from beneath like a secret kept only for them. Inside, the machine slept under dust, the air carrying the sharp sweetness of cut wood. Jonah had pulled 2 chairs up beside a workbench, the box waiting on top. Leah set her bag down, her fingers brushing the lid as though asking permission. You ready? Jonah asked. Are you? She countered. He gave a small laugh. Not really, but I think we need to do this anyway. They untied the twine together. The sound was soft, like a sigh being let out after years of holding. Leah pulled 1 letter from the stack, her handwriting this time. She unfolded it, the paper trembling in her hands. Dear Jonah, she read, her voice barely above a whisper. I failed my driving test again today. The instructor said I brake like I'm apologising. I laughed, but then I thought about you and how you never apologised for wanting things. I wish I were more like that. I wish I could tell you what I want instead of writing it down. Her throat tightened. She lowered the page. I don't even remember writing this, but I remember the feeling. Jonah's eyes glistened. He reached for one of his own and unfolded it slowly. His voice was low, rough. Leah, he read. If you asked, I would come back after 1 semester. I'd take the night train and sit on your kitchen floor while we figured it out. Please say something. Please don't let me carry silence instead of you. The words trembled in the air between them, vibrating against her ribs. She pressed her hands flat to the workbench. You were waiting for me to ask. I was waiting for you to ask. And in the middle, my mother—" Her voice broke and she stopped. Jonah shook his head, swallowing hard. It wasn't just her. It was us too. Fear was the easiest liar we ever believed. Leah nodded, tears burning her eyes. She grabbed another envelope from the box and thrust it at him. Read this one. He obeyed, unfolding carefully. Dear Jonah, are you happy? I wanted to ask that out loud today, but you were laughing with your friends and I didn't want to sound heavy. But I keep thinking, if you're happy, then maybe that's enough for me. Even if I'm not part of it. He stopped, blinking fast. Leah, that was the last one I wrote, she admitted. After that I gave up, or pretended to. Jonah set the letter down and leaned forward, elbows braced on his knees, hands clasped. Do you know what kills me most about these? She shook her head. That they're not just words. They're proof. Proof that we weren't crazy. Proof that what I felt wasn't some teenage fantasy I should have outgrown. It was real. You were real. And I let it get buried. Leah's voice cracked. We both did. For a long moment they just breathed together, the shop's silence wrapping around them. Then Jonah reached across the bench and took her hand. His calloused palm was warm, steady. When I read these, he whispered, I realise how small I've made my life. Steady isn't enough, Leah. I thought it was, but it isn't. Not after knowing this again. Her heart jolted, hope and fear colliding. Then what are you going to do? His grip tightened. I don't know yet. But I know I can't go on pretending that Rachel is what I want forever. Not when my heart is still here in these letters with you. Leah pulled her hand back gently, though every fibre of her wanted to hold on. Jonah, listen to me. I won't let us destroy someone else's life in secret. If you want this, really want this, then you have to choose it openly. You have to be brave. Jonah nodded slowly. I hear you. The shop was dimming, the light outside fading toward dusk. They packed the letters back into the box, slower this time, reverent. Neither spoke. The weight of what they'd read sat heavy, but it wasn't despair. It was possibility. At the door, Jonah turned to her, his voice raw. Tomorrow? Leah managed a small smile. Tomorrow. They stepped into the cool night. Leah carried the box like a living thing, her pulse echoing its heartbeat. For the first time in years, she felt the truth of their love in her bones, not as memory, but as something alive. And she knew the next step would be harder still. It began with small things. A walk through town, a coffee shed on a bench, a drive down the back roads where the cornfields stretched endless, and the air smelled faintly of cut hay. Nothing secret, not yet, but not loud enough for the world to notice either. Leah told herself they were just talking. Two old friends catching up. But the world under her skin knew better. Each time Jonah looked at her a fraction too long, each time his laugh tumbled out of him without restraint, something inside her flared back to life. They walked Main Street on a Saturday morning, sunlight draping the brick storefronts in gold. Jonah carried 2 coffees from the new cafe, handing her one without asking how she liked it. He remembered light roast, 1 sugar. She hadn't told him in over a decade. You're dangerous, she said, smiling despite herself. Why? His grin was boyish. Because you still remember things you shouldn't. Or maybe, he said, sipping his own cup. I just never stopped remembering. Her heart skipped. She looked away before her face betrayed her. Later they sat at the park, the box of letters unopened this time. Instead they let conversation wander. He told her about his business, about storms that had ripped through the county and the night spent clearing fallen limbs. She told him about her work in the city, the endless meetings, the silence of her apartment when she returned. They both confessed it hadn't been enough, that life sometimes felt like a checklist rather than a story. At one point, Jonah tossed a pebble toward the fountain. Rachel doesn't understand why I work late sometimes. She doesn't understand me. She's kind, but it's like we're walking parallel roads that never meet. Leah swallowed. And yet you stayed with her, he shrugged. Because parallel isn't lonely, just empty. Her hands tightened on the coffee cup. Jonah, you can't say things like that to me. Not unless you're ready to. I know, he interrupted softly. I'm not asking you to be in between. I'm just telling you the truth. I don't want to keep lying, not to myself, not to you. The honesty in his eyes made her chest ache. She turned her gaze toward the fountain spray, mist catching the light like shards of glass. The days began to blur into each other. A morning run-in at the bakery. An evening walk by the lake where they skipped stones again, laughing like kids. Once, she tripped on a root and he caught her by the elbow. The touch lingered longer than it should have, both of them acutely aware, neither pulling away. At night, Leah lay awake with the letters stacked neatly on her nightstand. She reread them until her vision blurred. Each word reminded her that this wasn't a fantasy. This was real and always had been. But guilt began its steady drumbeat. Rachel's name hovered at the edge of every conversation. Leah pictured her, a woman who had shared 5 years with Jonah, who didn't know her life was slowly unravelling. Leah's stomach knotted whenever she thought about it. One evening, walking down the narrow street that led to the square, Jonah broke the silence. Do you ever think about what our life would have been if we hadn't lost those letters? All the time, Leah admitted. And then I make myself stop, because it hurts too much. He stopped walking, turning to face her. It hurts because it was supposed to be us. Her throat tightened. She shook her head. Jonah, don't. Not unless you're ready to do something about it. Because I can't. She broke off, unable to finish. He stepped closer, not touching, but near enough that she could feel the warmth of him. His voice was low. I'm ready. I just need time to do it right. To be honest. Leah's heart leapt, but her voice was steady. Then be honest soon. Because this, she gestured between them, isn't something that can live in half-light. They walked on in silence, both of them knowing what had been said couldn't be unsaid. The past had pulled them back into each other's orbit. Now the future demanded a choice. Leah had imagined Rachel 100 different ways. Cold, sharp, controlling. Someone she could quietly despise without guilt. But the first time she saw her in person, reality dismantled every easy narrative. It was Saturday morning, the farmers' market spilling across the town square in neat rows of tents. Leah was weaving through baskets of peaches and jars of jam when a voice said warmly, Jonah! She turned before she could stop herself. There he was across the crowd, smiling in that polite way reserved for public spaces. And beside him stood a woman holding a bouquet of sunflowers. Rachel. She wasn't flashy or cold. She wasn't anything that would have made it easy. She was simply kind-looking. Brown hair tucked behind her ears, simple dress, no armour of attitude or arrogance. Her face lit when she looked at Jonah, the kind of light that made Leah's chest twist. Rachel glanced Leah's way and offered her a smile, the kind you give a stranger in a small town, open and without suspicion. Hi there, she said, adjusting the flowers. Leah's mouth went dry. Hi. Jonah's eyes flicked between them, the briefest hint of tension tightening his shoulders. He introduced quickly. Leah and I grew up together. Rachel's smile widened. Oh, that's wonderful. He doesn't talk much about high school, but when he does, it's always about baseball or fixing someone's skateboard. She nudged him playfully. Guess I know who to thank for keeping him out of trouble. Leah forced a laugh, her heart hammering. Not sure I did much of that. Rachel's attention returned to Jonah, the way her hand brushed his arm with familiarity, ownership without malice. Leah felt suddenly like she was standing outside a window, peering into a life that was already built, already lived. They exchanged pleasantries, Rachel chatting easily about the flowers, the weather, the new cafe that had opened. Leah nodded, smiled, pretended her skin wasn't crawling with the weight of what she knew, of what Jonah had confessed at the lake. Finally, Rachel glanced at her phone. We should get going. Didn't you promise to look at that maple tree for Mrs. Lyle? Jonah cleared his throat. Yeah, we should. He looked at Leah, the briefest flicker of apology in his eyes. It was good to see you. You too, Leah said softly. They walked away together, Rachel's hand brushing against Jonah's back as they moved through the crowd. Leah stood rooted in place, the voices of the market buzzing around her like static. She hated that Rachel wasn't cruel. Hated that she was warm, ordinary, likeable. Because it meant this wasn't a story with a clear villain. This was a story where someone good would get hurt no matter what. That night, Leah sat at her kitchen table, letters spread before her. She read Jonah's words again and again, words full of longing, of promises he'd never been allowed to keep. She wanted to believe those words still lived in him, still pointed toward her. But now Rachel's face threaded itself through every line, softening them with the weight of reality. Her phone buzzed. A text from Jonah. "I'm sorry you had to see that. Can we talk?" Her thumbs hovered. Finally she typed, "Tomorrow." The next day they met at the lake again. The air smelled of rain, clouds low and restless. Jonah sat with his elbows on his knees, staring out at the rippling water. "I didn't plan for that," he said immediately. "Running into you like that?" "I know," Leah said quietly. He dragged a hand through his hair. She's good. She doesn't deserve what I'm feeling right now." "No," Leah admitted. "She doesn't, but I can't lie anymore. When I'm with her, I feel steady, yes. Safe, maybe. But when I'm with you..." He looked at her, voice breaking. "I feel alive." Leah swallowed hard. "Jonah, do you realize what you're saying?" "Yes." His eyes burned with a mix of fear and certainty. "I've been lying to myself for too long. I can't anymore." Leah's heart ached. She wanted to throw herself into his arms, to let the letters in the box be the proof that this was right. But Rachel's smile haunted her, the kindness of it, the trust. "I won't be an affair," she said again, voice firm even as it trembled. "You won't be," Jonah promised. "If I do this, I do it the right way, no shadows." She searched his face, looking for hesitation. There was none. "Then be brave," she whispered. "Braver than we were back then?" He nodded, jaw set. "Tomorrow," he said. She gave a small, broken smile. "Tomorrow." When she left, the letters felt heavier than ever, pressing against her like a heartbeat. For the first time, she believed Jonah might actually do it, end things, choose her, choose them. And that was terrifying. Because it meant the story wasn't about if. It was about when. Leah tried to sleep and couldn't. The letters lay in a neat stack on her nightstand like a lighthouse that wouldn't dim. She picked one at random, not for the content but for the feel of it. The thin paper, the blunt edges, the way his handwriting leaned forward like it was always about to run. She read 2 lines and set it down. Tonight the past felt less like a memory and more like a promise with a deadline. Her phone lit the dark. "Walk?" "Jonah." She stared at the single word until it blurred, then typed yes and pulled on a sweater. They took the long loop around the square where the lamplight shone in halos on damp concrete. The bakery windows were dark. The cafe's chairs were stacked. A delivery truck idled at the curb, its engine a soft growl. "I tried to start," Jonah said after a block. "To tell Rachel something real. I got as far as 'I need to talk to you.' And then I asked if she wanted Thai or pizza." Leah blew out a breath that made a cloud. "Silence protects the wrong things." "I know," he said. "I know." They turned down the street with the cracked sidewalk and the sycamore roots that lifted the concrete into small hills. Leah adjusted her pace to avoid the familiar buckles. Her feet remembered the map. "What are you afraid of?" she asked. "Hurting her," he said. "Hurting everyone. Staying hurts too," she said. "It just spreads out the pain and calls it kindness." He winced. "I don't want to be the man who leaves." "You already are the man who isn't really there," she said softly. "Pick which truth you can live with." They stopped at the fountain. Winter had thinned it to a silver thread. Leah sat on the low rim, cold seeping through her jeans. Jonah stayed standing, hands in his pockets, a boy posture trapped in a man's frame. "My father left when I was 9, he said. He left in a loud way. Slammed doors, packed bags, gravel spray. I promised myself I'd never make that kind of exit for anyone." "Then don't," Leah said. "Make a different one." Soft words, open eyes. That's still leaving. It's also honest. He looked at her then, the way he used to when a joke was about to become a plan. I'll tell her, he said. I'll tell her I'm not in it the way she deserves. Tomorrow. She studied his face for the place where resolve ends and habit begins. She found resolve plain and unadorned. Tomorrow, she echoed, and for once the word didn't feel like delay. It felt like a line. They walked on. A light snow had started, the small, dry kind that drew no attention until it made everything new. At the corner, his phone buzzed. He looked. He didn't hide the screen. Got you the good tea you like? Don't forget Mrs. Lyle's maple at 9. He slipped the phone back into his pocket with a sound that was almost a sigh. She's good, he said. That's the part that breaks me. Being good to someone doesn't mean you belong with them, Leah said. That's the other lie we tell to make a hard thing look noble. He laughed once, no humour in it. You've gotten sharp. I had to, she said. I rounded my edges for years. They reached the shop without planning to. The bay door was down, the logo squirrel grinning in dim light. He jangled a key from his pocket. Come in a minute, he said. I left a heater on low. The pipes complain in this weather. Inside, the air held the ghost of sawdust and heat. He flicked on a lamp, not the overheads, and the shop shifted into a room instead of a warehouse. They stood by the bench where the letters had been, palms flat on scarred wood as if bracing for a wave. Jonah opened a drawer, pulled out a tin of bandages and a little brown bottle. I split my knuckle on a chain this afternoon. He showed her, a thin red seam. He held out the bottle. Would you? She cleaned the nick with careful fingers. He didn't flinch. She smoothed the bandage over his skin like a promise. It felt too intimate for something so small. It felt like everything intimacy actually is, useful, precise, ordinary. He didn't move his hand away. When I picture my life, he said, I keep seeing weird little scenes like this. You handing me a bandage? Me making you coffee without asking how? You laughing in my truck because the rhyming phone number is still stupid. It's not fireworks. It's days, she said. You're describing days. Yes, he said. And I want mine with you. He leaned in then, half an inch, a whole decade. Reflex travelled faster than thought. Leah lifted her palm, set it lightly against his chest, stopping him without pushing him away. She felt his heart jump under her hand, and something in her went bright and quiet at the same time. Not yet, she whispered. Not while you're still there. He closed his eyes, opened them. I know, he said, voice steady. I needed to know where the edge is. I see it now. The heater clicked. Somewhere a pipe knocked. They stood in that warm, soft rectangle of light and did not kiss, and both would remember not kissing as the moment they meant what they said. Tomorrow, he said again, but it wasn't the old weak vow. It had muscle in it. Tomorrow, she replied, and believed him. Morning came hard and bright. Leah made coffee and didn't taste it. She set the blank card she'd tucked into the box on the counter and stared at it like it might tell her what to write when this was over. She wrote nothing. Not yet. Jonah texted mid-morning, after Mrs. Lyle's. Lunch? After, she typed. He called at noon. Storm knocked a limb onto a carport out on Miller. I'm behind. Call me when you can, she said, and heard the steadiness in her voice and loved it. She walked to the square to keep from checking her phone every 3 minutes. The sky had cleaned to winter blue. On the bench by the statue, she reread one of his letters, the small one with only 3 lines, anchors thrown into sea. Today I missed you and didn't know where to put it. She folded it back into her pocket like a talisman. Her phone buzzed. Can you meet me at Elsie's? 10 minutes. She arrived to find him by the window, sawdust still in his hair, eyes clear in a way they hadn't been yesterday. She sat. He didn't reach for her hand. He didn't need to. I asked her if we could talk tonight, he said. No phones. No TV. Just talk. He swallowed. I told her I'm not where she is. That I've been pretending and it's not fair to either of us. I didn't say your name. It's not about triangulating. It's about telling the truth I should have told myself years ago. Leah's breath left in a shaky stream. She nodded twice because once didn't feel like enough. How did she take it? She said, "Are you sure you're not just tired?" he said. And I said, "I'm tired of pretending tired is all it is." She cried. I sat with her. I didn't fix it. Leah closed her eyes. Kindness and harm shared a table and passed the salt. "Tonight," she said, opening them. "You finished the sentence. Tonight," he said. They ate soup and didn't taste it. They spoke like people moving furniture, careful, coordinated, aware that dropping anything might crush a foot. When they stood to leave, he touched the back of her hand with one finger. It was nothing. It was everything. "Call me after," she said. "I will," he said. "No matter what it is, I'll call." He left to go be honest. She left to go be brave enough to wait. Evening slid over the town like a lid. Leah didn't pace. She folded a sweater. She washed a dish. She sat with the blank card and finally wrote a single line inside and closed it again without looking. The train horn blew 3 long notes somewhere beyond the houses. She counted without meaning to, waiting for the tremble in the railing of memory. It came. She exhaled. Her phone buzzed at 8:14. "Can I come by?" Jonah. "Yes," she typed, and her hands shook. He arrived with winter in his hair. He stood in the doorway and she knew before he spoke that he had done the hard thing. "I told her," he said. He didn't lean against the frame. He didn't sag. He stood up straight in his choice. "I told her it wasn't fair, that I couldn't give her what she deserves. I didn't put a timeline on the pain or try to sell the word friends. I just told the truth." Leah's eyes stung. "I'm sorry for her," she said, and meant it. "And I'm glad you told the truth." He nodded. "There will be logistics. Things to untangle. It won't be clean." "It doesn't have to be clean," she said. "It has to be honest." They didn't kiss then either. They stood in the doorway and let a different kind of relief in, the kind that feels like air after a long tunnel. He took her hand, just at the last second before he left, and squeezed once. "Tomorrow," he murmured. "Tomorrow," she said, and this time the word felt like a door, not a delay. The next day felt different from the start. Leah woke with sunlight spilling across her bedroom wall and the strange electric calm of a storm waiting just beyond the horizon. She moved through her morning like someone trying not to disturb a spell, coffee poured carefully, clothes chosen without thought, her fingers brushing over the letters in their box as if to remind them, he's choosing today. When Jonah called, his voice carried a steadiness she had never heard from him before. "Meet me at the lake, Sunset." The lake again. Their place. By the time she arrived, the sun had dipped low enough to smear the water in copper and violet. Jonah was already at the end of the dock, sitting cross-legged, hands loose on his knees. He turned when she stepped onto the wood, and she saw it in his eyes before he spoke. Clarity. "Leah," he began, rising to his feet. "I told Rachel everything." Her heart slammed once hard. "Everything? Not your name," he said quickly. "That part is ours. But I told her the truth, that I can't keep building a life with her when my heart is somewhere else. I told her it isn't fair to her, and it isn't fair to me." Leah swallowed, the weight of his words sinking in. "And what did she say?" She cried. "She asked if I was tired, if maybe it was stress. I told her no, that I'd been lying to myself for years. She didn't fight me. She just looked at me like she'd known all along." Silence pressed between them, broken only by the lap of water against the dock. "And now?" Leah whispered. Jonah stepped closer, so close she could feel the warmth radiating from him. "Now I choose you." The air left her lungs all at once. She had imagined those words in every possible way for years, but nothing matched the raw simplicity of hearing them here, now, with the lake bearing witness. "Say it again," she breathed, because she needed to hear it twice to believe it. He cupped her face gently, his thumb brushing along her cheekbone. His voice cracked, but it didn't waver. I choose you, Leah. After all this time, after all the silence, I choose you. Her hands rose to his wrists, holding him there. And I choose you. The kiss came softly at first, almost reverent, as if they were afraid to shatter the moment. But then it deepened, years of lost chances pouring into a single breath. When they pulled apart, both were trembling, laughing through tears. This isn't going to be simple, Jonah admitted. I don't want simple, Leah said. I want true. He rested his forehead against hers. Then we'll build it, one day at a time. They sat on the dock until the sky went black, their fingers laced, speaking in low voices about the future as if it were a fragile thing that might break if spoken too loudly. They talked about small things, dinners, mornings, laughter. About the porch swing she still had stored in the shed. About the letters and how they would burn the blank spaces between them with new words. For the first time, it felt like the universe had stepped aside and given them permission to live the life that had been stolen. When they finally stood to leave, Jonah kissed her again, slower this time, a promise sealed in the quiet night. Tomorrow, he said, smiling against her lips. Tomorrow, she answered. And for once the word carried no fear of delay, only the sweetness of expectation. Neither of them knew that tomorrow was already waiting with its knife. Leah had never known mornings could feel this light. She woke the next day with sunlight spilling across her sheets, her body humming with the memory of Jonah's kiss, the press of his forehead against hers, the words, I choose you, replaying like a hymn in her veins. It had been so long since she had dared to imagine a tomorrow that was truly hers. Now the thought of it seemed to ripple outward into everything she touched. Her clothes felt softer against the skin, her coffee warmer, her reflection in the mirror more alive than she remembered. By noon, she was at the small cafe where they'd first met years ago, her fingers wrapped around a mug while she waited. Jonah arrived late, hair windswept, smile easy, like he'd just learned how to breathe again. You're glowing, he teased, sliding into the chair across from her. So are you, she shot back. And it was true. His face looked different, not unrecognisable, but unburdened. As if a mask he'd worn for years had finally cracked and fallen away, leaving him freer, younger, closer to the boy she remembered in their first letters. They spent the afternoon talking, but not about the past, not about what had been stolen, or the years wasted in silence. Instead, they dreamed. He told her he wanted to build a cabin near the lake, with wide windows that let the seasons spill inside. She laughed and told him she still had the old porch swing, that she'd hang it on the front deck if he'd build it strong enough to last. They imagined breakfast on slow Sundays, shared books with scribbled notes in the margins, days spent growing old without regret. It wasn't naive dreaming, not anymore. It was the quiet kind of planning that came from knowing, finally, that nothing could be worse than the silence they'd endured. When evening fell, they drove together to the edge of town, where fireflies gathered in the tall grass. Jonah reached for her hand without hesitation now, his thumb brushing her knuckles, grounding her with every touch. I want to make this right, he said softly. Not just with us. With everyone. Rachel deserves more than half-truths. I owe her honesty, even if it hurts. Leah tensed. Do you think she knows? I think, he answered. She's always known. Maybe not the details. But the heart knows when it isn't loved the way it should be. The words struck Leah with a complicated ache. She wanted to hate Rachel, to erase her from the picture, but instead she felt only a heavy compassion. A woman who had been given Jonah's body but not his heart, who had built years of memories on soil that was never truly hers. Jonah pulled her closer, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. I don't want us to live in shadows anymore. You and me, if we're doing this, it has to be out loud. It has to be real. Leah pressed her forehead into his chest. His heartbeat thudded steady beneath her cheek. Out loud, she agreed. They kissed under the trembling light of fireflies, not desperate this time, but certain, as if the world was finally making space for them. The following days became a haze of blissful discovery. They fell into each other with a kind of giddy recklessness that surprised them both. Dinners stretched late into the night, conversations spilled over into laughter, and every parting kiss left them hungry for more. Leah caught herself humming at work, her co-workers raising eyebrows at her sudden brightness. Jonah too was different. Friends noticed the spring in his step, the way his eyes seemed sharper, less clouded. For once they didn't care who saw them. Leah found herself walking through town with Jonah's hand in hers, daring the world to whisper. And though whispers came, they felt like background noise to a symphony that belonged only to the two of them. One night, they returned to the lake with a bottle of wine and a blanket. They lay beneath the stars, trading secrets in low voices. Leah told him about the time she'd almost burned their letters after his wedding invitation arrived, the fury she'd barely contained. He admitted he'd once stood outside her house, drunk, unable to knock, terrified of what might happen if she opened the door. "God, we were so close to losing it forever," he murmured. "We did lose it," she whispered. "But somehow it came back." He turned, pressing a kiss to her temple. "No, we found it. We fought for it." The words wrapped around her like warmth, and for the first time in years, Leah allowed herself to believe in the possibility of a happy ending. Not perfect, but real. When they finally packed up to leave, Jonah lingered by her car. "I'll talk to her tomorrow," he promised. "I'll finish this clean. No more waiting." Leah nodded, her heart swelling with both fear and hope. "Tomorrow," she said. And she believed it. Believed that tomorrow would be the first day of the life they'd been owed for years. But as Jonah drove home that night, Rachel was already sitting at their kitchen table, her hands folded over her stomach, her face pale and unreadable. When he walked through the door, she lifted her eyes to his, and for the first time in weeks there was no plea in them. Only quiet certainty. "Jonah," she said softly. "I'm pregnant." Rachel was already seated at the kitchen table when Jonah came home, the lamplight small and tired above her. The radio was off. The whole house felt like it was bracing. He shut the door softly, snow hissing on the porch behind him. "Hey," he said, trying for ordinary and hearing the hollowness of it. Rachel's hands were folded over her abdomen, fingers laced so tight the knuckles blanched. When she looked up, her eyes were not pleading, as they had been the night before. They were clear. "Jonah," she said, and her voice didn't tremble. "I'm pregnant." The sentence reached him in pieces. The "I'm" landed first, then the pregnant unspooled and pulled the air out of the room. He gripped the back of a chair without meaning to. The wood bit into his palm. A clock ticked somewhere because clocks always did, even when time felt like it had stopped. "How?" he began and stopped. The question was ridiculous. He swallowed. "How far?" 12 weeks, she said. "I found out last week. I was waiting for the right time to tell you. There hasn't been one." He stared at the laminate pattern on the table as if it could give him a map out of this. "Rachel, his voice broke. He started over. "Thank you for telling me." She nodded once, as if to say, of course. The silence that followed was not empty. It was full of everything they had not said for years. "I know there's someone," she said finally. No accusation. A fact. He closed his eyes. There's something I needed to end. I told you that last night." She drew a slow breath. "I watched you, Jonah." Not like a detective. Like a person who loves another person and knows when he is looking at a place the light is coming from. A flicker of a smile that hurt to see. "I saw you at the market." With her nearby. "The way your shoulders changed shape." He lowered himself into the chair across from her. He could taste metal. "I didn't plan any of this." "I know," she said. Then after a moment, "Do you love me?" He pressed his thumb into the seam of the chair back. "I care for you." "I have built years with you. I want good things for you. But the answer you're asking me for, the one that should be simple, isn't simple. Not in the way you deserve." Something in her softened and set at the same time, like glass cooling. "Thank you for not lying." She looked down at her linked hands. "I am going to have this baby," he nodded. The word baby put weight on the table between them, a real thing with a heartbeat and an arrival date and a life that would need room. "I'm not asking you to stay because of it," she said, and his head snapped up, startled by the grace in the sentence. I'm asking you to tell the truth, and then to be the kind of father you can live with when you look at yourself in the mirror. Those can both be true. He let out a sound that wasn't quite a sob. Relief and terror braided. I don't want to abandon anyone, he said. Not you. Not... He couldn't say the baby again. It lodged in his throat. This child. You don't have to abandon anyone, Rachel said. But you do have to decide who you are in this story. She finally unclasped her fingers and rested her palms flat. I won't keep you by making you feel guilty. I also won't pretend I'm not hurt. Both things live here now. He nodded, a rough, grateful motion. The lamplight hummed. Outside, a car hissed past on wet road. What do you need from me tonight? He asked. Nothing you can give honestly, she said, almost smiling because she knew him too well. Go clear your head. Then sleep here. We'll talk about logistics later. The doctor appointment is Thursday morning. She hesitated. Jonah, whoever she is, don't let her be a secret. Don't make this uglier than it has to be. He closed his eyes. Leah's name beat against his teeth like a bird trying to get out. He kept it in his mouth a moment longer, not to hide her but to hold her safe from this room. I won't. He left the chair like a man stepping off thin ice. In the truck, he didn't start the engine right away. He put his forehead on the steering wheel and let the first sob come, ugly and human. When it passed, he turned the key and drove without choosing streets. The town made choices for him, left at the light, over the tracks, past the field where fog stood in low torn blankets. He parked by the lake. Of course he did. The dock creaked the way it always had. He walked to the end and sat cross-legged and let the cold reach him. The water made its small night sounds. Somewhere a train threw its 3-note call across the dark, and he counted without meaning to. 47. Still. He pulled out his phone. Messages blinked, 2 from Leah, here when you are an hour ago. You okay? 20 minutes after that? His fingers hovered. He typed and erased twice, then called. She answered on the first ring. Hey, she said softly, the way people do when they're trying not to scare an animal or a truth. I'm here, he said. His voice sounded like it had been dragged over gravel. Are you all right? A beat. What happened? He stared at Blackwater. Rachel told me. The pause was long enough that she could step into it if she wanted. He gave her the words. She's pregnant. Silence. He could hear her breathing. He could hear, too, the vast machinery of future shifting somewhere far off, where neither of them could reach it with their hands. Okay, Leah said at last in a voice steady because she made it be. The steadiness made his chest break a little more. Okay, she said again. Tell me everything. So he did. He told her about the kitchen table, the lamp, the way Rachel's hands had laced so tight, the question, do you love me, the answer that wasn't the right shape, the sentence, I'm going to have this baby. He told her about Grace, about boundaries, about the doctor appointment like a nail hammered into the week. Leah listened. When he stopped, she didn't fill the quiet with platitudes. You didn't do this to punish me, she said. You didn't wait to tell me because you wanted to keep 2 doors propped open. It landed on both of us. I know the difference. He swallowed a thank you and it burned his throat. I don't know how to be 2 things at once, he whispered. A father and the man who just said I choose you on a dock. You don't, she said gently. You choose again, this time with more than 2 people on the scale. He pressed his palm to the dock to feel the splinters and prove he was here. I don't want to lose you. I don't want to be lost, she said. But I won't be the shadow another child grows up hearing about. I won't be a secret. Whatever we are from this minute forward has to be something we can look at in daylight. I know, he said. He meant it. Can you come? She asked, then corrected herself. No. Don't. Not tonight. Sit with this. Sleep. We'll meet tomorrow when the sun is up and our sentences are less likely to break us. He exhaled a laugh that wasn't joy but wasn't despair either. Okay. Jonah, she said, soft and fierce all at once, no matter what happens next, you were brave. You told the truth. That counts. He ended the call and stayed until his hands ached with cold. On the walk back, he realized he had no idea how long he had been sitting. Time had returned and found him older. At home, the house was quiet. Rachel had left a blanket on the couch and a glass of water on the coffee table. He lay down and pulled the blanket over his shoulders and stared at the ceiling. He did not dream. He did not sleep much either. He kept his eyes open and tried on different futures until none of them stopped hurting long enough for him to close them. Leah, in her kitchen, put the phone down and stood still until the room found its centre again. Then she opened the tote and took out the blank card she had been saving. Inside, she wrote one line: "Love is not the only brave thing. Sometimes the brave thing is the border around love." She left the card unsealed. At the window, the streetlight painted a bright coin on the wet road. A fox moved along the fence line, a quick certainty in its step. Leah pressed her forehead to the glass and let the cold explain the shape of the night to her lungs. She did not cry. Not because she was strong, but because the tears would come later and she was saving them. "Tomorrow," she said into the kitchen's hush, and for the first time the word sounded like a weight and not a door. The morning after Rachel's revelation, Jonah woke on the couch with the blanket half slid to the floor. His mouth was dry, his body heavy, and the world outside the window seemed too bright for the night he'd just endured. For a moment he let himself lie there, eyes tracing the ceiling cracks, trying to remember what it felt like to wake without the weight of impossible choices. That memory was gone. Rachel moved quietly in the kitchen. He could hear the clink of a spoon against a mug, the sound of her moving carefully, deliberately, as though she too understood the fragility of this new space they were forced to inhabit. He sat up and rubbed his face with both hands. "Coffee's there," she said without turning around. A steaming mug waited on the counter. He picked it up and sipped. The silence between them was civil, almost polite, but behind it churned everything unsaid. They exchanged small words about the doctor's appointment, about the storm rolling in later, about Mrs. Lyle's broken maple limb. The conversation skirted around the baby, around Leah, around the fact that their lives were now split down the middle like a pane of cracked glass. By noon, Jonah excused himself to work. But instead of heading to a client's property, he drove to the lake. Again. The dock had become a confessional, and he no longer knew how to process anything without the water at his side. Leah was already there. She must have known he'd come. She stood at the edge of the dock, her hair whipped by the wind, her coat pulled close. When he approached, she didn't smile. "You look tired," she said. "I am," he admitted. They sat together, legs dangling over the edge. For a long time they didn't speak. The lake lapped against the wood, small and steady. It sounded like a clock. Finally, Jonah whispered, "I don't know how to do this." Leah folded her hands in her lap. "You don't have to know today." "But I need to," he said fiercely. "You deserve clarity. Rachel deserves clarity. And there's a child now, Leah. A child who didn't ask for any of this." Her throat tightened, but she didn't flinch. "I know, and that's why I need to tell you something." He turned, searching her face. "I love you," she said simply. "I always have. But I can't do it in the shadows. I won't be someone's secret, Jonah. Not yours, not anyone's. If this baby means your life is here with Rachel, then you need to say it. If you want me, then you have to build a life where I'm not hidden. But we can't live in the half-light." The words fell heavy, not cruel but absolute. Jonah pressed his palms to his knees, trembling. "Leah, I don't want to lose you. You're the only place I've ever felt fully alive." "Then don't lose me," she said softly. "But don't keep me waiting for scraps either. Because love isn't enough if it only survives in secret. I need more than stolen hours at a dock." He covered his face with his hands. "How do I be a father and still be the man who chooses you?" She looked out over the water. "Maybe the same way you build anything, one honest board at a time. But the honesty has to come first. For Rachel, for the baby, for me. For you." He let his hands drop, meeting her gaze. "What if honesty ruins everything?" "Then it ruins everything," she answered without hesitation. But at least it's real. At least it's not a lie. Her steadiness shook him more than any tears could have. He wanted her to be angry, to yell, to demand. Instead, she drew a border around herself with calm and love, and it terrified him because it meant she might walk away if he couldn't step across it. The wind picked up, rattling the reeds along the shore. Jonah reached for her hand. She let him hold it, but only for a moment before she gently pulled away. "Not like this," she said. "Not until you decide." He nodded, swallowing the ache that rose in his throat. "Give me time. Time, yes," she said. "But not forever. Because I won't live my life waiting in the margins. And you shouldn't either." They stood, walking back down the dock side by side, their shoulders almost brushing but not touching. When they reached the gravel lot, Leah stopped. "Tomorrow?" Jonah asked, the old word fragile now. She shook her head. "No promises. When you're ready, come find me. Until then, I'll keep making my life. With or without you." Her eyes glistened, but her voice was steel. She turned and walked toward her car, leaving Jonah standing in the cold. He watched her go, his heart tearing in two directions at once, toward the woman who carried his child, and toward the woman who carried his soul. That night he returned home to find Rachel asleep on the couch, one hand resting over her stomach. He stood in the doorway, watching her chest rise and fall, and felt a tidal wave of guilt crash through him. He wanted to love her. He wanted to give her the life she deserved. But his heart, every beat of it, was at the lake with Leah. For the first time in his life, Jonah realized that no choice he made could be free of breaking something. The only question left was which broken pieces he could live with. Thursday arrived like a fact. The appointment sat in the middle of the day the way a nail sits in wood, driven, unignorable. Jonah woke early and didn't touch his phone. Snow had fallen in a thin, stingy layer, making the streets look powdered and unfinished. Rachel tied her hair back at the kitchen sink and didn't meet his eyes. "Will you come?" she asked, as if no were a reasonable answer he might give. "Yes," he said. They drove in a hush that wasn't hostile, just careful. The clinic smelled like lemon cleaner and dryer sheets. A poster above the intake desk showed a cartoon heart with a smile. Everything about the room felt too simple for what it held. In the dim of the exam room, Rachel lay back and lifted her sweater, the gel a cold lake on skin. The tech narrated in a steady murmur, her fingers gentle and practiced. Jonah watched the screen because he didn't know where else to put his eyes. Static, then grain, then a small pulsing light like a firefly in fog. He didn't know he could recognize a heartbeat by sight until he did. "There," the tech said, tapping the monitor with a capped pen. "Hello, little one." She turned a dial and the room filled with sound, fast, galloping, impossible. Jonah sat very still. His mind didn't arrange words. Awe and terror braided in his throat until they felt like awe alone. Rachel looked at the screen and then at him. Not triumph. Not a plea. Just a softness he hadn't seen in months, one that had nothing to do with him and everything to do with the small world blinking on the monitor. He felt something surrender and something steel at the same time. After, she wiped the gel away and sat up slowly. In the parking lot, she put a hand on the roof of the car and breathed the cold. "Whatever you decide," she said, "this child will know you showed up." She didn't say, "and then you left," or "and then you stayed." She let the sentence stop where it could still hold. He nodded because his tongue felt stupid in his mouth. They drove home through town where everything kept doing what it always did. The bakery doorbell chimed, our dog dragged someone toward the park, a train spoke 3 long notes and he counted without meaning to. 47. Still. Only then did he take out his phone. A text from Leah sat unanswered since morning, thinking of you. No need to reply. Border holds. He exhaled through his teeth and typed, heard the heartbeat. I don't know how to be a man with one heart in 2 places. He didn't send it. He put the phone away like a match he didn't trust himself with. Leah spent the morning with her hands in ordinary tasks on purpose. She stripped the bed and remade it. She watered the plants, apologizing to the thirsty fern out loud, because talking to green things had always been easier than talking to people. She laid the letters in their box, and for the first time since finding them, closed the lid and set a book on top so she wouldn't open it by reflex. She wrote him a letter on the blank card at last, the pressed leaf on the front like a quiet emblem. Jonah, I love you. Love is a bright thing, but it does not excuse shadow. I won't be the hidden room in the house you build. If you choose your child and a life that keeps me out of the kitchen and the porch and the days, I will honour that and go. If you choose me in daylight with kindness and truth in all directions. I can live with pain, I cannot live with pretending. This is not a dare and not an ultimatum. It is a border with a gate you can open only from inside yourself. She sealed the card before she could sand down its edges. Then she put on her coat and went for a walk because sitting still made thoughts echo too loudly. At the square, fate did the small-town thing it loved. It made paths cross where a city would have let them miss. Jonah came from the opposite corner, paper bag from Elsie's in his hand, sawdust still in the cuff of his sleeve as if he had tried to work and found his mind wouldn't hold a straight line. They saw each other at the same moment and stopped. Neither smiled. How was... Leah began, and stopped because the question already had an answer in his face. I heard it, he said, voice low. It's real in a way I knew, but now I know. Leah nodded once. I'm glad you were there, he swallowed. I wanted to run to you after. Not because it was bad. Because it was huge. I'm here, she said, which was true and also a warning. But not to be the place you run to instead of home. I know, he said. He looked down at his hand, at the stupid paper bag, at crumbs tapping the bottom like rain. Hearts shouldn't be spacious enough to hold this much contradiction. Maybe they always were, and we only notice when the good things don't align, she said. Did Rachel? She was clear, he said. Graceful? It hurts to be around grace when you don't deserve it. Leah took the card from her pocket. Read this later, she said. Don't call after you do. Not until you can say the kind of sentence that can stand up in a room with all three of us in it. He nodded, took the card like it might bruise. When? When you're ready, she said. I'm not putting a date on your courage. I'm only telling you it expires if it lives too long on a shelf. He almost laughed and didn't. Of course you found a way to make mercy sound like a plan. They stood in the thin winter sun, with the whole town doing its chores around them, and didn't touch. Then Leah stepped back first. Take care of yourself today, she said. Eat the sandwich before it's just bread. He watched her go. The paper bag felt suddenly heavy in his hand, as if it carried more than lunch. He took it to the shop and set it beside the vice, and ate half without tasting it. Then he opened her card. He read it twice and then a third time slower. The words didn't accuse, they arranged the room. He folded the card and slid it under the tin of screws he reached for 12 times a day, so he would have to choose to see it, not be surprised by it. He picked up a board and planed its edge, the shavings coiling like pale ribbon, soft as the inside of a wish. The work steadied him enough to let thoughts come without capsizing. That evening Rachel sat at the table with a list and a pencil. I looked at the budget, she said without ceremony. If you end up renting the small place above the florist for a while, we can swing 2 sets of everything without either of us drowning. I'm not making that plan to push you out. I'm making it so neither of us has to pretend when we decide. Jonah stared at her. The kindness in logistics nearly undid him. You don't have to make this easy for me. I'm not, she said. I'm making it adult, that's different. He nodded, throat tight. I'm going for a drive, he said, and she didn't ask where. He drove the long way that circled the tracks twice. A freight rolled by, containers stacked like blank pages, and he counted, out of habit, out of superstition. He didn't like what the number told him. It told him nothing. He pulled into the lot by the lake and didn't get out. He opened the glove compartment and found, without meaning to, one of Leah's old letters he had tucked there days ago, after carrying it in his jacket like a talisman. If you asked, I would say yes to anything. He could not ask the baby for permission. He could not ask Leah to wait. He could not ask Rachel to be smaller than she was. The only person he could ask a thing of was himself. The border was in him, not around him. He went home. He did not call Leah. He sat on the edge of the bed he hadn't slept in for 2 nights and stared at the rectangle of streetlight on the floor. He pictured 2 kitchens, 2 porches, 2 sets of mornings. In one, he became a father who stayed and loved as fully as he could manage while living a half-life that would harden into habit. In the other, he became a father who shared custody and told the truth and built a house that held laughter here cognized in his bones. Both futures had regret. Only one had the kind he thought he could live with when he was old. He lay down and didn't sleep. Toward dawn, when the birds began their thin winter practice songs, he sat up and said a sentence out loud so the room could hear it first. "I will not teach my child that love and lies go together." The words didn't decide everything. They decided where the decision had to stand. He made coffee. He packed a bag with the thoughtless efficiency of someone who has packed 1,000 work kits and never his life. He wrote Rachel a note that said, "I'm at the shop. Tonight we should talk about the apartment above the florist. I will be present. I will be kind. I will not vanish," and left it under the magnet shaped like a pear. On the way out, he paused at the doorframe, at the place where years leave small scuffs. He put his hand flat there and breathed the way you do before stepping into cold water. Then he stepped. Leah sat at her table with the box closed, and her palms on either side of it like a book that teaches you patience. She did not text. She did not count trains. She washed a bowl. She wrote an invoice. She added soil to the fern. Courage, she had learned, was often maintenance. When the afternoon thinned to that colour that isn't yet evening, she walked to the porch and stood with her coat open to the air. Somewhere beyond the houses, a horn announced a train's approach. She didn't count. She listened to the echo fade and thought of borders not as walls, but as the lines that make a map legible. They chose noon on purpose. No dusk to blur the edges, no night to invite hiding. The square sat in full winter sun, bright and cold enough to make breath visible. Leah arrived first and stood by the statue, gloved hands in her pockets, chin lifted to the light as if to check the weather of her resolve. Jonah came from the direction of the shop, walking like a man who had finally memorized his own weight. He stopped a few feet away, near enough for warmth, far enough for room. "Daylight," he said quietly. "Daylight," she answered. They moved to a bench. Traffic stitched along the street. A child dropped a mitten and a stranger handed it back. The world performed its ordinary acts and made a space for theirs. Jonah set a small envelope between them, unsealed. "I packed a bag. I'm taking the apartment above the florist, at least for now. I told Rachel last night I won't vanish and I won't lie. We'll share custody when we get there. Until then I'll be at appointments and I'll fix the guest room into a nursery with my hands the way I know how." I said the words out loud, so she didn't have to guess at all the worst shapes. "I meant them." Leah's eyes shone once and steadied. "Thank you," she said. "For putting the truth in the room where it belongs." He kept his gaze on the envelope. "I don't know how to be a father yet, but I know what kind I don't want to be. The one who teaches a child that love needs lies to live." She nodded slow, as if setting a cornerstone. "Good," he turned then. No pleading. No performative pain. Just a sentence he had scrubbed down to its grain. "I choose you, Leah. Not as a secret. Not as relief. As the person I want beside me in the days. But I won't ask you to stand in a delivery room's shadow. I don't want our beginning to be someone else's ending song. I need to build this with right angles." Her breath left and returned. "I choose you too," she said. And then, because border eyes love that learned its manners, but not while everything is soft clay. Not while a baby is learning what arrival means. "I won't be the hidden room in a half-built house. If we do this, we do it in time and kindness." He managed a smile that reached his eyes and hurt them. "Then we do it like that." They sat a while, letting agreement become real in their bones. They didn't touch because they knew how touch could turn a vow into a shortcut. When the wind lifted and set down again, Jonah tapped the envelope. "I wrote last night," he said. "A letter that isn't about the past. About the days. About coffee without asking how you take it. about porch swings and grocery lists and 100 ordinary scenes that look like a life. It's not a promise with a date, it's a blueprint. Leah reached into her coat and drew out one of the blank cards from the stack she kept now like tools. A pressed leaf on the front, a spine that could listen. "Then we write them here," she said. "No more unsent drafts hiding under steps, daylight." They bent their heads and wrote. No speeches. No flourishes. He wrote about a crib he would sand too smooth. About Tuesdays that would need comfort. About learning the math of custody and still finding ways to keep wonder running through the pipework of their days. He wrote that love to last would require schedules and soft skills and the courage to be boring together on purpose. She wrote about borders and gates and the kindness of saying the truth before it curdles. About leaving room for a child she had not made but could make room for anyway, the way a house makes room for light by refusing certain walls. She wrote about missing him without martyrdom and loving him without theft. She wrote simply, "I will not ask you to be less of a father so that I can be more of a lover. We will make a shape that does not require subtracting." They traded envelopes. They read in silence while the town kept moving. A man pressed the crosswalk button. The bakery bell chimed. Somewhere a dog barked at a bicycle, then apologised with a tail. Jonah folded her letter back along its crease and blew out a breath that fogged the air. "You always were better at geometry," he said. "At seeing the shape before I did." "It's only a map," she said. "We still have to walk it." He looked at the blue mailbox on the corner, paint scuffed to primer at the slot. "We should mail them," he said, and then shook his head. "Not as a wish, as a ritual." They stood and crossed with the light. At the mailbox he offered his hand like a ceremony. She placed her envelope against his palm. He placed his against hers. They slid them in together. The metal throat took them with that small, clean sound Leah had come to love, the clink of arrival. They didn't let go immediately. Their fingers brushed in the act of release and held there a heartbeat longer. Then they stepped back. "What now?" he asked, not because he hadn't thought it through, but because he wanted to hear the answer land in air that other people were breathing. "Now you move above the florist," she said. "You paint and you assemble, and you learn how the crib works, and you fix a wobbly chair and you show up where showing up is needed. And she smiled in a way that included sorrow and didn't drown in it. "I go finish packing my mother's house. I take the porch swing out of the shed. I put it on sawhorses and sand the old paint off and make it ready for someday." He closed his eyes at someday the way a thirsty man closes his eyes at the sound of water. "Do I get to help?" "In a few weeks," she said. "When logistics have names, when we can be said without anyone having to whisper." He nodded. "A month from today." "The lake." "Noon." "Not a test." "A check-in." "A check-in," she agreed. "And if life is too loud that day, we forgive the noise and try the next one." They walked back to the bench the long way, past Elsie's, where the chalkboard sign promised soup that would do more than warm your hands. Jonah stopped at the florist's stairs and looked up at the narrow door painted green. "Window faces east," he said. "Mornings will be honest." "Good," Leah said. "Make coffee strong enough to remember and gentle enough to stay." He laughed then, a sound unbroken by apology. They stood another minute, two people practicing the art of not adding unnecessary pain to a day that had enough already. "I won't call tonight," he said. "I'll send the new address. When the crib is built, I'll take a picture, not because I did a grand thing, but because I did a right one. And I'll send you the porch swing," she said, "in progress. Proof that someday is being worked on by both of us." He started up the steps, stopped, came back down one tread. "Leah, yes, I love you. Not more than my child. Not less. Differently. And I'm going to learn how to let those loves teach each other instead of compete." Her throat tightened. "Then we'll both have to be brave in unglamorous ways. Maintenance," he said and smiled. "Courage is maintenance." They did not kiss. They used their mouths for a different kind of promise, names and times, the leaving undone of shadows. He went up the narrow stairs carrying a bag that wasn't heavy enough to count as moving. She walked toward her car, and passed the mailbox again and touched it lightly, as if blessing the metal that had taken so much and given so much back. At the corner, the train spoke, 3 long notes like a line drawn with a ruler across the day. She did not count. She listened and let the sound belong to all of them now. That evening, in the apartment above the florist, Jonah opened a can of paint and rolled a wall the colour of weathered linen while the heater clicked and the town got dark. He set the crib box against the wall and read the instructions all the way through before picking up a screw. He tucked Leah's letter in the drawer of the nightstand and left it there on purpose, not as a secret, but as a compass. That evening in the cedar room, Leah lifted the porch swing onto sawhorses and pulled a strip of old paint with a heat gun until the wood beneath showed clean and pale. She hummed because her body needed a job for the hope it carried. She left Jonah's letter on the mantel, where grief and bravery and a future in pieces could all see it. Daylight didn't make anything easy. It made it true. The house gave itself back to silence the week Leah finished packing it. She moved from room to room with a roll of tape looped over her wrist, her mother's handwriting winking at her from lids, winter scarves, old photos, kitchen drawers, odd lids, until even the labels ran out and only the walls remained. In the cedar room she swept, then stood with her palms on the windowsill, looking out at the maple where once icewing had hung crooked. The porch swing she had rescued now rested on sawhorses by the door, scraped to new wood, smelling like clean grain and possibility. She ran a hand over the smooth armrest, the spot where paint had peeled in a crescent that once looked like a smile. Not yet, she told it. But soon. Downstairs, an envelope waited on the hall table, her letter from the square, returned to her own address by a future that had accepted its terms. She didn't open it. She slid it into the tote with the others, a blueprint among blueprints. She locked the front door and placed the brass key on top of the meter box for the realtor, the way the email had instructed. On the porch she paused, like a person learning to leave without taking anything they shouldn't. Beyond the houses, a train called 3 clean notes across the morning. She didn't count. She let them pass through her chest and out the other side. Above the florist, Jonah learned the shape of mornings. The east-facing window kept its promise. Light climbed the wall in a pale ladder and made the new paint honest. He drank coffee strong enough to remember and gentle enough to stay, as Leah had ordered, and sent her a picture of the folded cardboard crib instructions with a single caption, "Reading first." She replied with a photo of the porch swing mid-sanding and wrote, "So am I." He went to appointments, held a paper cup of water while Rachel squeezed his free hand, learned to decipher the lunar language of sonogram swirls. He installed a car seat he checked 8 times. He and Rachel sat with a pad of paper between them and drew weeks as boxes, shifts and pickups, lamplight feedings, rest, both of them clumsy and stubborn and kind, both refusing to name what they didn't yet know how to name. At night, in the narrow bed, he lay on his side and read Leah's letter in the nightstand drawer, until the words grew warm and ordinary instead of expert and frightening. "We will make a shape that does not require subtracting." He sent a picture of the crib finished, a hand flat on the rail as if swearing something to it. Leah sent back a picture of her palm laid on the swing's arm with the same gesture. They didn't add hearts or pet names. They trusted the wood to carry it. At the month mark, the lake wore a hard glitter of ice at its edges. Noon threw a bright stripe down the water. Leah arrived first, as they'd agreed, no ceremony, no perfume of crisis. Jonah came a minute later with a thermos and 2 cups. They stood with steam ghosting their mouths. "How's the room?" she asked. "Like a small country," he said. "A crib, a chair that rocks, a rug that my boots keep apologising to." His mouth tipped. "There's a stack of books. 3 about sleep. 1 about trucks. 1 about a rabbit who decides to stay." "Good," she said, letting the last title pass through her voice like a blessing. "And you?" "I'm present," he said. "Some days that feels heroic. Some days it feels like tripping in place and calling it progress." "That's being alive," she said. "Heroic and clumsy aren't opposites." He poured coffee. They didn't touch. They stood in the only kind of closeness that didn't endanger what they were trying to build. When she handed his cup back at the end, her glove brushed his bare wrist and they both felt it. Neither turned it into more. "Next check-in?" he asked. "When the peonies at the florist start pretending it's spring," she said, and he nodded like a man who had been given a map that was mostly compass. Spring arrived in small, almost improper advances, a softening at the edge of puddles, the florist's window crowded with cut tulips that held their chins as if practicing bravery, a new squeak in the shop's bay door that said it had survived the winter and now would complain about it. It was morning when Rachel's call reached Jonah on a job 3 streets over. He left his saw on the sawhorse and said to the crew, "I have to go," and they said, "Of course," in the voice good men use when another good man's life arrives and changes shape. The hospital room was too warm. The clock did its steady secular liturgy. Rachel gripped his hand with a ferocity that still had room for humour. He learned the vocabulary of ice chips and breath counts, and the sorcery of nurses. When it happened like weather, sudden, total, undeniable. A daughter. Small and astonished. A mouth like a startled comma. A hand that closed around his finger and recalibrated what the word promise weighed. He cried inelegantly, which turned out to be the right size of crying for the moment. Rachel cried too, then laughed, then cried again. They looked at each other in a way that wasn't romantic and wasn't not, something companionable and bright and bruised, a recognition that whatever else they were to each other now, they had made a person who would say their names back to them someday. He texted Leah a picture of nothing with a face in it, the hospital window, a corner of blanket, because he didn't want to cross something sacred with a shout. Then he wrote, "She's here. Everyone is okay." His finger hovered. He added nothing else and hit send. Leah was in the cedar room, boxing the last of the kitchen when the phone buzzed. She read the sentence twice. Then she sat on the porch swing, on the sawhorses still, not yet hanging, and let the wood hold her like a sentence with no verb. She typed, "Daylight. I'm proud of you." Erased "I love you," and left it implied, the way a house leaves space for sun that will know where to enter. She sent the smaller courage. That night, Jonah dozed in a chair that was trying its best. Nurses administered their strange compassion. The baby made a sound like crumpled paper learning vowels. He thought of Leah sanding paint and of the mailbox that had taken their letters and given them back as scaffolding. He thought maintenance and felt less afraid. Summer arrived by stubborn degrees. Jonah learned diapers in the dark. He learned lullabies and the geometry of tiny sleeves that refused to contain arms. He learned to assemble a bassinet in the middle of the night with one hand, because the other hand was holding a person who had no idea what time meant. Leah took a short-term lease in the city because grief at the house wanted a different architecture. She hung the porch swing from a rented balcony that wasn't meant for it, and found, to her surprise, that it fit anyway. She sent Jonah a photo of her feet tucked under her, the swing just a blur, the caption, "Testing, not hurrying." He sent back a photo of a stroller wheel and a coffee cup on the hood of his truck with, "Same." They missed a check-in once because the baby had colic and Leah's car wouldn't start, and the florist had a leak that turned the stairwell into a sermon about gravity. They rescheduled without apology. The next time they brought lists. Not love letters. Grocery lists, repair lists, shared time lists, proof that ordinary life was the only ground strong enough to build anything on. They traded one item each and did it for the other that week. He sharpened her kitchen knives. She oiled the squeak from his apartment door that cried whenever he left for a dawn feeding. At the last appointment before the move to fuller custody, Rachel stood with Jonah on the curb, the baby asleep with her mouth open, like a small summer moon. "We did this part well," Rachel said, tired and fierce. "We are doing this part well," he corrected, and she nodded, satisfied that he knew present tense belongs to care. Rachel looked at him then with a tenderness that had no interest in possession. "You still love her," she said, not cruelly. "I do," he said. "And not instead of loving our child." "I know," she said. "I hope someday that is a sentence you don't have to defend." He smiled, a little crooked. "Me too." She lifted the baby into his arms with the casual reverence of people who have practiced and made it look like grace. "See you Tuesday," she said. "Text if you need the good swaddles." He walked to the truck. He did not look back. He did not have to. Autumn arrived without bothering to ask permission. The florist's window filled with branches the colour of promises that had kept. Leah drove back into town with the porch swing in the bed of her truck, its paint new but its form remembered. She parked by the lake at noon because a map had once said to. Jonah was there already, their coffee steaming like two small arguments with the cold. "How is she?" Leah asked. "Learning vowels," he said proudly. "Teaching me patience. We are both good at one of those." They walked without holding hands, then sat on a bench and didn't kiss, and none of that felt like failure. They traded an envelope each, new letters, not unsent now but ongoing, dated and stamped and already read, then brought to share anyway because daylight had become a habit rather than a stunt. "Someday?" he asked. "Someday," she said. "In practice, not theory." They stood as a train called 3 notes across a sky that had decided on blue. Neither counted. Both listened. In the exact middle of the 3rd note, Leah reached into her tote and took out a length of rope and 2 heavy hooks. "The swing?" she said. "The porch," he answered, understanding. "Not today," she added, and he nodded. "Not today," he agreed. "But soon." They parted at the corner where the blue mailbox kept doing its work. Leah touched it the way people touch old stones in churches, not for luck but for recognition. Jonah climbed the florist's stairs with a bag of apples and a folded list in his pocket that read, "Milk, screws, patience." Upstairs, the baby sneezed like a punctuation mark. He laughed, picked her up and began the ordinary liturgy again. Wipe, button, hum. He did not feel divided. He felt multiple. He felt like a house with rooms enough. In the city, Leah sat on the resurrected swing with a book unread beside her and let the afternoon move. She had a photo on her phone of a tiny hand around a big finger. She had an envelope on the table that smelled faintly of sawdust and coffee. She had grief and hope in the same breath, and it didn't choke. They had not vanquished regret. They had simply refused to let it be the architect. Love didn't win. It stayed. It learned hours and errands and the courage of not insisting. It waited without withering. It grew roots in visible soil. Someday would not arrive with a trumpet. It would come the way all good days did, quietly, on schedule, finding them where they had promised to be. And when it did, there would already be a swing that knew how to hold the weight. There would already be a child who understood that love and truth could share a house. There would already be 2 letters on 2 mantles that had been read so many times they had become part of the grain. The train called far off. They listened. Then each returned to their work, which was the point all along.